I'm Sharon. Welcome to my Music Theory Tuition series where I work with you step by step through the ABRSM Discovering Music Theory grades. I'll work through every single exercise and explain everything you need to know. You can access information about the books I have available to help you on my website. Go to sharonbill.com. For advert-free and longer lessons, you can become a patron at patreon.com/SharonBill. If you can give me a like, that would be super, and please do subscribe to my channel to stay updated. You can support this channel by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/SharonBill. Pressing on to page 18 of the Grade 2 Discovering Music Theory, we move on to the final page of this chapter regarding rhythm. So on page 18 of the Grade 2 Discovering Music Theory workbook, we now get introduced to the topic of dotted rests. And we know that a dot after a note makes the note half as long again, and it's exactly the same when it's added onto a rest. However, the way that we count those notes or rests will change depending upon what unit beat we are counting in, because we could be counting in crotchet beats, we could be counting in quaver beats, we could be counting in minim beats. So let's just look at how this will work out mathematically. And because maths is not my strongest subject, I do find it easy to just diagram out so I can see exactly what's happening. And so if we're counting in crotchet beats, a crotchet note with a dot, we've got one crotchet beat here, and then half as much again is 1.5, isn't it? And that's exactly the same when it's a rest. However, when we're counting in minim beats, we need to just think how that works into the unit of a minim. And so let's think, there's a minim beat, and let's divide it into half, and then we'll divide it again. And so we know that one crotchet is half of a minim beat, and then the dot is half as much again, and so we can see that it's 3/4 of a minim beat. So it's 1.5 crotchet beats because it's all of beat 1 plus half of the next beat. It's 3/4 of a minim beat because we know that a minim beat is 2 crotchets, which would be half, half, but this is only half of that first crotchet beat, so it's just 3/4 of a minim beat. And so that is exactly the same when it comes to rests as well. It's exactly the same amount of time, whether it's sound or whether it's silence. And so if we're thinking in quavers, so here we have a quaver note with a dot after it, so that is exactly the same in sound or in silence for a note or for rest. So it's all of the first quaver beat and the first half of the next quaver beat. So 1.5 quaver beats. But if we're thinking in crotchet beats, let's think about that. So here is a crotchet beat. And let's just divide it up. So if this is one crotchet beat now, a quaver is half of that, and then the dot is half as much again, and so it's 3/4 of a crotchet beat regardless of whether it's sound or silence. The fact that it's a rest or a note doesn't change the maths at all. And so we just need to bear in mind what unit we're counting in and how we divide that maths, as it were. We'll get some examples of this later. So let's move on and we'll sort of put that theory into practice as we work through these exercises. So exercise 5 asks us to complete the time signature for each of these melodies. Sometimes we know how many beats per bar, but we need to find out the unit value of each beat. Are we counting in crotchet beats, quaver beats or minim beats? Sometimes we're told which unit to count in, but we don't know how many beats there are per bar. So let's have a look at exercise 5A. I think we can perhaps just skip to bar 2 first of all, because that seems the easiest. Let's not get too confused with these rests and dotted rests. So we know that one crotchet divides into 1 minim divides into 2 crotchets, and then here we have 3 quaver beats with a triplet, so that's 3 quaver beats into the time of 2 quaver beats, which we know is 1 crotchet. So we have 1, 2, 3 crotchet beats per bar, so we can say that the bottom number is 4. Let's double check it in this bar. So we have a crotchet beat here and we have a crotchet beat here, but let's see what's going on in the middle. So here's our crotchet beat. We have a quaver rest, which is half a crotchet beat, and then we have half as much again, so that's a semiquaver's worth, and then here's the remaining semiquaver, so there is our middle crotchet beat. So that's correct. So perhaps now you feel you can just try these next two. Just have a go, press pause and try. Always work in pencil, and then it doesn't matter if you go wrong, you can just erase it out and have another go. You will learn much more thoroughly by just having a go. So we know now that we're counting in crotchet beats. So let's see what we've got. So we've got a crotchet beat here, a crotchet beat here. Here's a crotchet beat, and then we've got half as much again, which is a quaver, which with this quaver here gives us another crotchet beat. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 crotchet beats per bar. Let's double check this in this final bar. So a quaver and a quaver gives us a crotchet. Here we have a minim, which divides into 2 crotchet beats, and then here we've got the same scenario that we've worked previously, but let's just work it out again. It's good practice. So here is our crotchet beat. Let's divide it into quarters. So we know that a quaver beat, whether it's rest or silence, is half a crotchet beat. The dot is half as much again, so that's a semiquaver's worth. So we have 3/4 of a crotchet beat, and our remaining quarter is this semiquaver note. So 3/4 of a beat silence, quarter of a beat note, all adds up to give us a full beat. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 beats there. Now in exercise 5C, we are counting in minim beats, but we don't know how many yet. So let's see what we've got in this first bar. We have a minim here, nice and easy, there's another one. And then we have 3 crotchet beats with a triplet, so that's 3 crotchet beats in the time of 2 crotchet beats. And we know that 2 crotchet beats is 1 minim. So there's another minim beat. So we have 1, 2, 3 minim beats. Let's see this next bar. A crotchet plus a crotchet is a minim. Here's another minim. So we've got 1, 2 minim beats. Let's see what's going on here. So let's think about this. Here's our minim beat now. We're going to divide that into 2 halves, which would be crotchet, crotchet. There's our minim beat in total. And then I'm just going to divide it again. So we know that a crotchet beat, whether it's note or silence, is half of a minim beat. And then the dot is half as much again. That's a quaver's worth. It's half of the second crotchet beat's worth. And then here is the remaining quaver. And so all together, so we've got 3/4 of a minim beat rest, quarter of a minim beat as a note, and all together there's our minim beat. So 1, 2, 3 minim beats. There we go. It's a bit of a math scramble, isn't it? But take it slowly and just think about how those beats divide out, and it soon makes sense. Let's move on to exercise 6, where we are given the full time signature, but there's going to be a gap, and so we need to add a rest, just one rest to complete whatever is missing. So we need to find out what there should be in each bar and then fill in the gap with a rest, just one single rest. So here we're in the time signature 2/2, which means 2 minim beats per bar. And just for good revision purposes, let's look at this bar here. We know that there are 3 crotchet beats with a triplet, which means 3 crotchet beats in the time of 2 crotchet beats, which is 1 minim. So there's 1 minim beat, there's our second minim beat. So there's our 2/2. Now here is a minim beat in the second bar, and then here we have a crotchet, which is the first half of the minim beat, and we need this to be worth a crotchet to complete the second half of the minim beat. So let's see what we've got here. So we need to fill this final crotchet beat's worth. So here's our crotchet beat. Let's divide it into quarters. We have a quarter of a beat with the semiquaver, but we need to complete this remaining 3/4 of a beat of silence, and we know that 3/4 of a crotchet beat is a dotted quaver rest, because if we just diagram that out again, we know that a quaver is half of a crotchet beat, and then if we half as much again gives us a semiquaver. So there's 3/4 of a crotchet beat, and then there's the remaining quarter that completes the crotchet beat. With this crotchet beat, there's our first minim beat now complete. Let's move on to exercise B. Now we have 3 beats in a bar, and each beat should be a crotchet, so we're looking for 3 crotchet beats per bar. Let's just look at this bar just for revision purposes. So we know that the triplet here means that these 3 quaver beats are played in the time of 2 quaver beats, and we know that 2 quaver beats is 1 crotchet beat. So there's beat 1, there's beat 2, there's beat 3. Now here, let's look at this last bar. We have 2 crotchet beats here. 1 minim divides into 2 crotchet beats. And then here, we should have altogether a crotchet beat. And again, we've got the same scenario as we had here, because here's our crotchet beat. We'll divide it into quarters. So a semiquaver is a quarter of a crotchet beat. There's a quarter of a crotchet beat. And then we know that a quaver is half of a crotchet beat. And then half as much again is the dot. And that gives us 3/4 plus the quarter of sound. So 3/4 of a beat silence, a quarter of a beat is a note, and altogether that gives us our full crotchet beat, which completes that bar. And now we have 4 beats in a bar for this last exercise, and each beat is a minim. So let's just look at this first bar just for good revision. Let's be good students and squeeze every drop of knowledge that we can while we've got the chance. So here's beat 1, 1 minim beat, 2 minim beats. And here this triplet tells us that these 3 minim beats are played in the time of 2. We just squish 3 into the time of 2. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 minim beats. Let's look at this next bar. So there's 1 beat, 2, 3. And then let's look at this minim beat here. I know it's complete, but let's just work out what's going on here. There's our minim beat, which is divided into 2 crotchets. And then if we divide it again, so we have a crotchet beat, which is the first half of the minim beat. The dot after it gives us half as much again, so that's 3/4 of a minim beat. And we looked at how that could also be written as a rest. And then a quaver, which is half of the second part of the minim beat, completes that. So we have 3/4 of a minim beat, and then a quarter of a minim beat fills that minim beat's worth. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And now this is going to help us with what we're going to do here. There's 1 minim beat. A semi-breve divides into 2 minim beats. So there's 1, 2, 3. Here, this must be our minim beat. We've got the quaver, which is a quarter of the minim beat. So let's do that again. Let's just make the most of it. So we need to complete this minim beat. So let's divide it into half. So this is a minim's worth, and half of a minim is a crotchet, half a minim is a crotchet. And if we divide it again, we've got a quaver's worth, half of that second crochet beat. So we need a crochet beat here. That's half of the minim beat, and then we need half as much again to make the 3/4, and then there's our final quarter. And we know from where we looked at it right at the beginning of the page, a dotted crochet is 3/4 of a minim beat. And then we get a little bit of revision at the end of this chapter on rests. So if you want to just go ahead and test yourself, it's a good opportunity to really get those brain cells working. Have a go, doesn't matter if it's wrong, that's okay. So I'm hoping you've had a go. Let's check this through together. Now here we have these two rests which can be easily confused, and I always remember that this rest that sits on the middle as opposed to this one that hangs from the 4th line down, and so the 4th line down is the 4 crochet beat note, which is the semi-breve. So I remember 4th line, 4 crochet beats, whereas this one in the middle just sits down for a couple of beats. That's your semi-breve, that's your minim. So here, there's our semi-breve hanging from the 4th line, and here your minim rest just sitting down for a couple of beats, a couple of crochet beats. And then here we have a crochet rest with a dot after it, so we just replace that as a note. And here we have a quaver rest with, oh, I've just done that, copied that one, a quaver note with a dot after it. And that's that page completed, and that's that chapter completed. I hope this is helpful to your studies. Please do like and subscribe to stay updated. If you'd like to support this channel, you can buy me a coffee, and for advert-free lessons you can become a patron. Do visit my website where you'll find many resources available to help you. Visit sharonbill.com. Thanks for watching. Bye.